I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are gathered today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So welcome to Central Safety Group September event, especially welcome to our new corporate members, APM Employment Services. I'm Nan Austin, President of Central Safety Group. One of our past speakers and members, Kevin Jones, has alerted us to a book launch that might be of interest to the members. It's called A Fair Day's Work, The Quest to Win Back Time by Sean Scalmer. It is on next Tuesday, the 16th of September at Trades Hall. For details, log on to their website or LinkedIn page for more details. If you do attend, we'd love to hear from you and put that on our blog on our website. So keep in touch. For the presentation today, please remain on mute during the presentation. And if you have any questions during the presentation, use the chat function. And there will be time after the presentation for questions. So now put the spotlight on David and I shall welcome David Caple AM, who's a leading figure in occupational health and safety here and overseas. He's advised a wide range of businesses, industry groups and public sector organisations and has worked within Australian and overseas governments on work, health and safety strategy. He spent 40 years as an OHS consultant and was an adjunct professor, Centre for the Ergonomics and Human Factors at La Trobe University for 20 years. David was also president of the International Ergonomics Association 2006 to 2009, in which capacity he represented professions in 23 countries to governments, universities, researchers and practitioners. In 2004, he co-authored a new international publication called Giving Your Business the Human Factors Edge, Making It Happen. David's a wonderful supporter of Central Safety Group and is also a current financial member. So welcome, David. We love your annual presentation and we're looking forward to hearing more from you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Nan, and thank you to everybody making the time to join this particular thing. You're right, it's become a bit of a September ritual to speak to the Central Safety Group, and I always look forward to it because a lot of things happen during a year and they're all interesting topics. I think, like most people on the call, many of the projects I've been involved with in the last 12 months have been around the incoming psychosocial regulations, and I'm actually doing a presentation tomorrow to WorkSafe in relation to some of the projects that we're looking at prevention rather than resilience and support focus. So maybe next year we might just catch up on how all those are going. But this year, in speaking to Marina, we've chosen the new manual handling initiatives. Craig, can everybody see the presentation now?
I hope so.
Okay, that's fine.
General nods.
Good, thank you. So Nan mentioned about the Giving Your Business the Human Factors Edge, which was a publication that we did last year with Andy Amada in America and Karen Langamaranas from Colombia. And I just thought I'd let you know that a podcast has been done. If you're interested, it's on the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub. And on the slide, you can see the link to that. But I just want to give a general plug to that website because Sharon Todd and others from the executive have now uploaded, I think there must be nearly 50 podcasts on this link on people around Australia that are doing interesting work in the human factors and ergonomics area and safety more generally. So have a look at the hfehub.au and just have a look at all the podcasts. And if you're driving somewhere and you would like to have a listen in the background, they go for about 30 minutes to an hour. But they're a good showcase of what's happening in Australia. I've got 3 topics to talk about today in manual handling. The first one is about large retail stores. The second one is about libraries. and the third one is about childcare. And the reason we've done this is just to look at how do we look at systemic improvements in complex industry sectors where musculoskeletal injuries is an ongoing challenge. So in terms of the large retail stores, what we all learn is that the store is part of a supply chain. It's at the end, after purchasing and stock control has brought product into Australia, generally from other countries. And at the warehouse and distribution centre, most of this stock will be unpacked and palletised or put in roll cages ready for delivery to the stores. And in the store delivery process, you've got a lot of manual handling, and with the seasonal peaks, changing in clothing, for example, or looking at predictable peaks like Christmas. Just as an aside, one of the things I've learnt this year, I think most of you would have heard about the Black Friday sales that now retail often have. They're actually producing equivalent to Boxing Day sales volumes. So we're looking at multiple peaks now of bringing product into retail stores. And when you're looking at peaks, you really need to have a look at where is that product going to be living and how many times is it handled. When any of you in retail or family in retail would know, when you rent floor space, it's not cheap. And so most of the companies optimize the retail space to sell their goods. So they have very small back of house area where a lot of the stock is processed, ready for display. That brings about a whole range of issues. And if you have a look at, let's say Bunnings, for example, it's a warehouse type retail complex. So they are quite happy to show product looking like it's in a warehouse. But if you're looking at a high-end retailer like a Collins Street warehouse retail, they want everything to look, eye height is by height. They want everything to look smick. So they handle their product a lot more. Like any for-profit business, the budget control over staff numbers is incredibly tight. And I don't know about you, but when I go into many stores now, it's trying to find a salesperson to get help from. And you just have to spend your time trying to find stuff yourself. And this is because staff numbers have been cut enormously in many retail companies just to make ends meet. And the other thing I've learned recently in relation to store security, I have been gobsmacked about the amount of shoplifting that is happening in Melbourne at the moment in retail stores, to the point that in a clothing store I visited recently, they had a new range of those sort of puffer jacket, those things we wear in wintertime. And they said to me, we will only put either the extra small or the extra large out on display. If we put the other sizes, majority of them will be shoplifted by the end of the weekend. And that they have, some of these groups have got technology they've bought online that removes the store security tags so that they can take these items out from the front door. It's just gobsmacking. Anyway, store security is a big issue. I just want to look at three areas in retail. The first one is back of house. And on the top corner is a photo of a back of house area of one of these concrete box stores. And it was always designed that people could bring the product in from the warehouse, store it in the back of house, decant it onto their trolleys and take it into the stores with minimal need for storage out the back. But what you find is that the majority of the back office area has got broken fixtures, it's got redundant stock, it's got product that's waiting to go to archives, blah, blah, blah. So what was designed as part of the manual handling process is severely compromised because of lack of integration into the store management model. In the bottom one behind it, you can see a woman in a black t-shirt, and she's unpacking clothing that's been imported. And you'll see the arch in her lower back, which she gets constant fatigue. And the main reason that she's getting musculoskeletal discomfort is that underneath the bench are storage boxes for coat hangers and the like, and she's got no room for her feet. Such a basic biomechanical risk that if you look at your own kitchen, they've always got a kickboard underneath the cupboard so that you can put a toe or half a foot when you lean forward to do an activity. Just an interesting aside, most of the clothing that comes in from other countries is wrapped in plastic, and the force required on the fingers and the wrists to rip some of the plastic is unnecessarily strenuous. And not only does it present an ergonomic risk, but it's a sustainability problem. The amount of wrapping and plastic on incoming goods is a whole area of another debate. The next two photos, you can see some ladders, and a lot of stores in the back of house have these high platform ladders with 5 or 6 rungs to enable them to store things, in this instance like shoes, at the top. But manual handling of the ladder presents a real problem, particularly for shorter and lighter weight people, because these ladders have got wheels, and if you're not heavy enough, you can stand on the ladder and the ladder will move. And so it presents a safety problem as well as an ergonomic and manual handling problem. The lower ladder, the 2-step ladder, is a great idea. This eliminates the use of the little orange safety step, which is on the bottom right-hand photo, and it gives them an area to stand and work on. So that's an innovation that's good. The roll cage, you can see a store person putting a package onto it. These are frequently used now for online shopping. Since COVID, online shopping has absolutely become a way of life, not just for clothing, but a whole range of industry, retail. So the back office of many stores now has an online workbench where customer orders are processed and sent out from the store. I mean, you've all seen that and probably used it through supermarkets, but it's the same in many large retail companies now as well. The bottom one is a person closing a compactus and some basic manual handling training on how you actually walk with the compactus door to your side with your arm bent at 90 degrees and gripping the handle of the compactus with a straight wrist, where if you compare the forces on the shoulder and the back in trying to stand facing the compactus and swing it from right to left is significantly a higher risk factor. So these are the sort of little things that are in the back of house. And the last two photos are of just the 2 main trolleys in larger retailers, the double level flat top and the single flat top trolley. In terms of the store retail space, the planogram is what's used to tell the staff that every blah blah store, you'll find certain items in the same racking area. But there's a lot of low height work, either kneeling on the floor, squatting down low, or bending over in preparation. And so what we're trying to work with is designing the planogram to bring the high frequency sales up to the waist to mid-chest height. And we know in retail, eye height's by height. So if you want your high volume stuff to be seen, it needs to be up in that range, not down on the floor. And you can see in the bottom 2 photos below that is reaching above shoulder height. Reaching above shoulder height is such an endemic problem in retail, in stock handling and stock distribution. You can see some product on a pallet in the top line. And I mentioned before about shops being seen to be a bit of a warehouse. From a manual handling perspective, obviously from elimination, we don't want people in the store to have to bring product in on a pallet and then manually handle every one of them onto the floor, leave it on the pallet, and do your planogram to incorporate palletized product on the shop floor. And many companies are now picking up that recommendation. And just have a look as you're going around. It just means that when the truck arrives, you can bring the product straight into the store and not have that issue with the back of house clutter. The bottom two photos on the right are the same product, but in different companies' stores. On the very bottom corner, you'll see the product in a horizontal racking profile, and the photo beside it is the same product standing vertically. The manual handling of lifting it on and off the horizontal rack is significantly higher risk than having the product stacked vertically, where it can be slid on and off a trolley. So different companies, different risk assessments, different retail outcomes. And similarly with the kayaks and canoes, this particular store had a structure to their racking that had a horizontal beam to hold it in place. But every item then had to be lifted over that beam out of the display. Where if you compare that in the competitor's store, they don't have that beam there at all. And so you don't have that manual handling task. So there's a lot of innovation in basically merchandising, rack design and display to minimize manual handling. And in the front of house, a lot of mannequins need to be dressed. They themselves are a manual handling hazard. So there's a training piece on how to lay it on the ground and dress the mannequin and then stand it up, rather than trying to lift and carry the mannequin around. The bottom photos are of the store security and the bags. Fortunately, most people don't buy bags anymore, but the counter area, you can see underneath the counters, often have shelving for bags. And it also, I don't know if you can see, but the person working at the counter has 1 foot on the bottom shelf. And this is very common to relieve static load in the lower back. It goes back to the same issue we talked about in back of house. If people are working forwards and they're standing, 1 foot should be in front of the other, or at least enable them to rock forwards and back. And it's the same with office ergonomics. If you give somebody a standing workstation, you shouldn't be training them how to stand erect, because their hands are forward at their center of gravity on the computer. 1 foot should be forward than the other, so they can actually stabilize their center of gravity. It's the same principle. So let's have a talk now about libraries. Particularly during COVID, libraries became a safe space for members of the community, and it still is the case. And if you visit a lot of public libraries, like I've had the opportunity, you can see a lot of members of our community going there because they're warm, they're out of the weather, they're actually somewhere where they can feel safe. They also provide an amazing community service, and a lot of the service from public libraries is now done in delivering books to the home, in swapping books and CDs between libraries, hosting book clubs, children's clubs. And so it's not just a book borrowing facility, it's a community facility. And also they need to be very flexible and not have just rows and racks of books. So when you look at story time, and being a grandparent now, I have taken a couple of toddlers to story time at the local library. I think all public libraries do this nowadays, but they have to reconfigure spaces often to create for large groups of children, which means manual handling the racks around. We need to look at these as children's safety spaces as well. So all the things that children might trip and fall or cut themselves on is part of this design. And it's also a facility for many community members to go and access computers and IT technology. So libraries are very complex spaces. And if you look at shelving design and manual handling, again, above shoulder work and above shoulder manual handling is a challenge when racking goes above about 1.8 meters. Pushing trolleys on carpet with small diameter wheels is also a manual handling challenge. So what we've been involved is replacing wheels. Sounds pretty basic, but if you've got an issue of force on a trolley, by going to a higher diameter wheel and a harder surface of the wheel, it doesn't bury itself down into the carpet, and it significantly reduces the force to push the trolleys around. At the lower end, in the children's area, for example, a lot of the books are down low for the children, but a lot of the library staff spend a long period of time on their knees, squatting on the carpet or on chairs, working at lower heights. So what a number of libraries are now doing is eliminating the use of the bottom shelf, basic hierarchy of control, because if they don't need to use the lower shelf in their collection, it means that a lot more staff have less risk. And similarly, with the higher shelves, they're lowering them as well. I'll show them on the next slide. But on the right hand, you see there's two staff members pushing a whole library rack on wheels, and they're setting up for story time. And that's exactly what we see. But it's a double rack of books where now you can buy these racks as single racks, and they're just as they can figure into the same footprint, but they're much easier to manual handling. So with future purchases in libraries, we're saying buy single modules, not double or triple modules, if you're going to put it on wheels. The top left one is an example where they've eliminated the lower rack, like I've just said, and they've restricted the top rack. So for supervision, they can see across the library. The bottom photo is to do with folios. The most difficult and awkward objects is art books in libraries, because they're big, they're heavy, and you need to store them between knee height and mid-chest height. So you'll see there in the photo with the bigger books, there's nothing on the bottom shelf, there's nothing on the top shelf. And that's a manual handling initiative to deal with the art books. Returning books and CDs is a continual challenge in libraries. But one of the good things on the right hand is that with the check-in technology, you can stack them all on top of each other, and the whole stack will be registered on the computer. I'm not sure whether any of you borrow books from libraries, but it's the same technology for us. If you want to borrow 2 or 3 books, you put it on the pad and the computer reads the lot at once. So it's eliminated a lot of manual handling through this new technology. And delivery between libraries in the van, on the interlibrary loan bags, these black bags. And the bottom photos is where they're preparing books to deliver to homebound people and then returning them back to the library. So they've got a CLAX, C-L-A-X cart. Terrific little innovation for manual handling of books that can fold down in the back of the van for movement to and from the client's home. The last area is childcare. It's been in the news a lot lately for all sorts of undesirable reasons, but it is a place that has very stringent legal and ethical requirements that have to be followed. And the staff have to deal with trauma-informed practices, because what we're finding is that there are many children in childcare who have experienced trauma, and therefore the staff need to be aware of how to interact with them, whether they're handling them, caressing them, caring for them in a way that doesn't trigger their trauma. And many parents dropping children off now are also feeling quite traumatized. So that interaction is so important in the skill set in the childcare sector. Childcare offers cognitive, physical and emotional development programs, and these programs often require the use of equipment, environments that the children can interact with, but those programs themselves have manual handling issues for the staff. And the emotional and team-based skills that are being developed with the children is to understand when to interact with them, how to interact with them. And because physically adults are obviously taller than many of the children, a lot of the adults spend time sitting on the floor, kneeling on the floor, sitting on the children's low seats to bring their eye-to-eye contact into a relationship with the child. But that brings a whole lot of other musculoskeletal challenges for the staff to get down on the floor, to get up from the floor, to maintain those postures for prolonged periods of time. So here's some of the postures that you see in childcare centres. There's squatting, there's kneeling, there's sitting on the floor. Most of the programs for the pre-kinder offer the child to sleep, and many of the children need someone to rub their back and just to be beside them when they're going off to sleep. So these staff spend a lot of time sitting on the ground or kneeling to support the children. The bottom left-hand photo is a little blue chair which folds down to nothing. They're fantastic. They provide back support, and it just enables the staff to sit on the floor at the level of the child and get some postural support. The third photo on the bottom is of a low gas height chair. These are also fantastic because rather than sitting on the children's furniture, the staff can sit on these low chairs and move themselves around the floor area between activities. So these are innovations which are now available in this sector. But if you're a grandparent or a parent, think of getting one at home if you're spending a lot of time on the floor supervising little children. The top right is the steps that toddlers now use to get themselves up to have their nappy changed. And this is an educational development process, but it eliminates manual handling for the staff. And it's wonderful to see these young little toddlers walking up the stairs and then plopping themselves down and getting their nappy changed and then walking back down again. So another elimination of manual handling control, which is very effective. And the photo beside that is the mattresses that the children use to sleep on during the day, which are all stacked at a height which is quite accessible, and it's a housekeeping issue as well. I haven't got a photo of the cots, but most of the cots in the baby's area are now on high legs, so that when they're lifting the baby in and out of the cot, it's above mid-thigh height for the staff to reduce manual handling. And the sides go down rather than up, so that they're not having to reach over the side of the cot. So there's a lot of design innovation in childcare about manual handling. And the gripper tool in the photo is for picking toys, Lego, God save us, all the multiple product which is around on the floor. We've been trialling these rubbish pickup sticks and the staff love them. So if you're picking up lots of children's toys at home, buy yourself one for Christmas, because they're actually a great little innovation for home as well. In support spaces, there is a lot of manual handling. On the top photo there, you'll see the net over a sandpit, and handling that net. I mean, this is a very small sandpit net. Some of the sandpits in these childcare centres are enormous. And so what we've had to do is to cut the net into segments so that you can lay segment over segment. But manual handling, you're not having to lift the whole net. often when it's got leaves and other rubbish blown onto it and folded up, ready for the children to use. The second photo, you'll see a staff member with a broom. But where you've got sand, you've got spillage over walkways. Where you've got tan bark, you've got tan bark over walkways, which introduce a lot of slip and fall hazards. So there's a lot of time spent sweeping and raking tan bark, and that is another manual handling task. So we're trying to look at the design of these sand pits and tan bark under swings and slides and all that other equipment to prevent it from blowing or being kicked over walkways. In the kitchen, because most childcare provide meals, there's a range of manual handling issues there for the staff. In one childcare, we found for budgetary reasons, they were buying bulk flour, bulk rice, bulk all sorts of oils, but they were in 20 kilos containers, which for the staff was presenting manual handling risks. So we had to have a purchasing policy to say, we don't purchase anything over 10 kilos, be it flour or rice or oil or whatever it might be. It costs a bit more, but it does provide an injury reduction. And with the laundry, there's a lot of laundry in childcare. We've also had to look at trolleys to move wet and dry laundry around. So manual handling in childcare is another challenge. So just to summarise what we've covered in this presentation, I normally say start with the systems overview. What is their core business and what are the assumptions that you have to make about a day in the life of the people in that workforce? And I use the term day in the life because I find it's a non-threatening way of staff opening up and talking about the issues that might cause them some concern. The other term I often, with the psychosocial one, is the old what keeps you awake at night question. And what does your family worry about you in the work that you're doing? And allow them to articulate it in their own way. So I don't tend to use checklists in this type of project in fieldwork. I'd rather them populate the checklist in their own language. And ask them about what is it about your day in your life that causes you discomfort or strain or sleepless nights or whatever it is. And they very quickly identify that. And observe their system of work, both the static work, like some of those postures that we've talked about today. Very common static is probably insidious in many jobs through poor postures and prolonged repetitive work, as well as the dynamic lifting, pushing, pulling type tasks that we've looked at. The risk assessment is often I ask why now? Why now am I here? Is there a reason why in 2025 we're even doing this project? Is there something different? Have we had more injuries? Have we changed the way we do things? And it's interesting in childcare, for example, staff are not allowed to touch children who are decompressing, when children just completely lose the plot. In a couple of the childcare centres where this was taking place, I heard stories of staff who were no longer there because they tried to grab the child and stop the child from doing things that they thought were inappropriate. And I had to learn myself, because being a parent and a grandparent, I've often questioned myself about what to do. But there are very strict controls about manual handling of children in these settings. Anyway, it doesn't answer the why now question, but I often find it interesting what's changing in these industry sectors that we need to be cognitive about. And then doing the consultation with the staff and the managers about the controls as a basic practice, when I do a project like the ones I've just talked about today, I rarely would send a report on findings and recommendations without having previously had a debrief to say, this is what I've heard, this is what I've seen, this is what I'm thinking. These are my top 10 recommendations. Can we just determine that they're not going to introduce other hazards and that they're going to be reasonably practicable? Because anything that I produce is discoverable in court. So I don't want to produce a document that you don't understand, or that I've actually been led an agenda, and being an outsider, we're very vulnerable for that, which may not actually reflect the full story. So I think the debrief and talking about where you're coming from is very critical to the process. And then trialling and adoption of controls, it's part of the regulatory process. But often as consultants, we don't get the chance to go back 6-12 months later to see what worked and what didn't work. Sometimes we do. I not long ago ticked over 40 years of doing this sort of thing, and and I'm still working with Telstra, with the banks, with some of the organisations we've started with in the early 1980s. And you can see the impact, but the thing that I suppose you'll learn is that businesses continually reinvent themselves and change. And so, for example, in banking, a lot of our manual handling issues were about tellers reaching across counters with bags of coin and money. Well, now, you could have moths flying out of my wallet for the amount of money that's in it. People don't use cash in the way they used to. And so the issues of banking are now more about the psychosocial issues, dealing with violence and aggression and intimidating behaviour. So, I think we learn as we go, as issues come and go. We don't necessarily repeat ourselves. We're dealing with an emerging industry sector. So today, just to wrap up, we've talked about retail, we've talked about libraries, we've talked about childcare, and we could continue to talk about other industry sectors, but hopefully it's stimulated some ideas that you could have a look at when you go into retail, or you go into your local library, or you might be visiting a childcare facility. I often think the work that we all do puts another lens into our glasses, that you see things that maybe other people don't identify. And I think sharing ideas through the Central Safety Group just helps to bring some of those ideas to focus. So when you visit these places, you're looking out for opportunities for improvement. So thanks, Nan. I'll just stop there, and we can spend the last 15 minutes or so just having a general chat.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So much food for thought. I am looking forward to discussing this even further. For those of you who would like to participate in the conversation, please turn on your cameras as well as your microphones, so we can actually engage with you face to face for those presentations. We do have a few minutes, but so much food for thought. I was just thinking of just the simple, cluttered workplaces. While you're talking, I looked at a library supplies website, Rayco, and everything's got small wheels. They assume they're for indoor workplaces and haven't got large wheels. So there's a lot to do on a whole industry basis, which would make things so much better for the end users in the stores. And our community spaces, which I call stores are community spaces these days. People go there for entertainment as much as to spend money. So we do have to be cognizant of the people who are in those environments and responsive to so many different community individuals and groups. So the, oops, I can't see everyone. So if you'd like to particularly ask David a question, you can put your hand up, or just start talking, and we'll try and coordinate those activities. So over to the team if anyone has a question.
I'll go first.
Oh, thanks, Craig.
David, it's Craig. So on topic and slightly off topic for what we've just discussed, I've had a few requests at work in the last 6 months now for under desk treadmills, which I didn't even think existed until I had to Google it. They're like treadmills that maybe have a belt as narrow as like 0.5 meter, and they're designed to fit under a desk so people can walk while they type. My gut is, I generally follow my gut at work, and my gut was like hard no, but I don't like to say that to the staff. I'm like, let's look into it a little further. And my gut is still hard no. If nothing else, how do you move the thing out from under there, but also walking and typing? Anyway, I guess I'd just throw that over to you. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm with you. I put that in the category of gimmick ideas.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any evidence or science behind doing that. I can just imagine the safety issues.
Yeah.
And having somebody being somebody who shot off the back of a treadmill because I couldn't reach the button. I just wonder about liability if you were the employer and you brought that into the workplace.
Yeah, and that's what I've said to the managers. A couple of the ones that people have suggested don't even have like the safe. I've never used a treadmill, but the lanyard that, like the kill switch that pulls out if you've stepped off the back. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
It was interesting, Craig, while you're talking, one of our members has suggested wobble boards as maybe an option for people to stand on. So they're more of a static board, just requiring some ankle movement. But you can get very focused on your work and you forget to do that balancing. So same with those fit balls people wanted to sit on. No, they're not a chair.
Yeah, and then the reason...
Oh, it's a bad idea, Alex says. He's not recommending the wobble boards. No, sorry about that.
I'm with you, Alex.
and the reason both people requested them is because they are too busy to leave their desks. So in both instances, I said, I think I've found the bigger issue here.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not active enough. Well, that is the issue, but like, let's look at why you're not leaving your desk.
Yeah. And look, I'd have to say, I went to a conference in Italy and about musculoskeletal, and the Australian people, we were talking about sit-to-stand workstations. And the Europeans said, well, what are you talking about? So we had to show them photos. And they said, what are you doing? You know, the issue is job design. Why are you getting people that feel they have to stand or sit for prolonged periods of time? The issue is about getting people doing work where they move around and generate blood flow. And you don't generate blood flow by sitting or standing for prolonged periods of time. So it was just an interesting mirror on the way we advocate for sit-to-stand workstations, where in the European, they don't follow that model.
Fabulous. Okay, Will, over to you. You've had your hand up for a while. Oh, we can't hear you. See if Will can sort out his sound issues.
Is that any better?
That is much better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Hi, David. Hi, everyone else. Good to see you. Just going back to that last question, this is not why I put up my hand, but I will admit that I've used a bike trainer at a standing workstation during boring meetings. For a time-poor parent and a full-time worker, it's about as safe as it gets, exercising at a desk. And I've got a friend who does a lot of exercise who does that quite frequently. So that might be another option. I have had the same request as well. It's also been a no from me and my team officially. David, my question is around, you didn't mention training, and I understand why, because the regulator themselves have recommended officially on their own website that how to lift training is not a risk control measure that they recommend, and the literature supports that as well. We continue, though, at least in healthcare, to rely on training, scenario-based training in particular, as a primary risk control measure for patient manual handling in particular. Do you have a view on, I guess, whether or not that sort of approach to risk management around hazardous manual handling still has a place in 2025?
I think, well, absolutely yes. because in patient handling, you're dealing with slip sheets, you're dealing with slide boards, you're dealing with hoists, and all of those you need to train as a team on how to use them safely. And we know we get injuries when they don't use the right slings, when they're not positioned to enable the centre of gravity of the patient to move safely from A to B. So I think the issue of training of, bend your knees and keep your back straight, we've gone long past that. I think now training is contextual. And I think what you mentioned, Will, about scenario-based training, I think that's absolutely important to be retained. Is that consistent with your thoughts, Will?
I mean, I think, yeah, the how to lift training is still, well, the biomechanics and the ergonomics and the positioning is still part of the education that at least we provide where I am and probably across most healthcare facilities. I think, what you're referencing there is more instruction and information and training on plant and equipment, which is different to how to lift training in and of itself. And I definitely agree that has a necessary place. I guess it comes to, yes, I do think it's important that we retain competency-based education in that really complex hazard, but the way in which we go about it, I guess at the moment I'm starting to sort of question, how well it actually does manage down the risk and reduce harm, because I've been doing this job for 10 years now, and patient manual handling is still the predominant cause of injuries to staff in healthcare. And we've had these programs in healthcare for much longer than I've been around as well. And I think it's a good time for us to reconsider what that approach might look like and how we might shake it up a bit.
I think that's a very healthy way to approach it. One of the retail companies that I didn't name anybody, but they have an e-learn manual handling, and everybody has to do that. It's very basic, oh my gosh. And it's to the point of embarrassment, because when you go into their store and you look at what manual handling entails, the basic training covers none of those risk factors. And that, I suppose, is a bit tokenistic that, yeah, we've done the manual handling training. But when you say, well, how do you apply that here? Most of your work's above shoulder height. There's nothing in the training about above shoulder height work and so forth. So I think it has to be contextualised to a day in the life debate of, well, why are we doing this? Where's the issue? And cover the principles of centre of gravity and so forth. And then it has some credibility. Sorry, I know Christina's had her hand up for 5 minutes.
Yep, still having a few sound issues.
Sorry, I'm off mute. Is that right?
Okay, yes, much better. Thank you.
Sorry, we had to move to an iPad in the middle of that, so we're a bit challenged with our technology here. Thank you, David. It's always fantastic. And Will, whilst you were talking, I was keeping an eye on your shoulders to make sure that you weren't actually on a bike to that. David, I wanted to go back to that bit, and really interesting that asking that why now, because often you get people who say, we've always done it like this and it's not a problem, but it is, well, why now? And it is a lot around, work is changing and the way we do our work is changing and the pressures on people is changing. But often that is, that why now is an explanation up to management as well, that why now is because the way people are doing their work has changed and your expectations have changed and the design has changed and the throughput has changed. And I was just wondering, maybe if you could expand on a few contexts where you've used that kind of why now question. I found that really quite a fascinating a fascinating question and something that to consider popping into our repertoire when speaking with people, right from the floor level all the way up to, you know, senior management.
Look, we could talk a lot about this, Christina, because musculoskeletal and to some extent psychosocial, I put in the bucket of discretionary illnesses because there's no blood on the floor. And discretionary illness, in my mind, is like the iceberg model where the water goes up and down, depending on a whole range of factors, where you've got no problems and then suddenly you've got an ocean full of problems. And the why now is to understand why is the water level changing. And it's interesting, as you said, with experienced people who say, well, we've always done it this particular way. And you say, okay, so why now is it that we're getting these injuries or we're getting customer complaints or whatever the indicators are? So I think you have to take an evidence-based approach and say, well, how do we measure performance that I'm here to address, whether a productivity problem or a safety problem or quality problem, and use that as a starting point and say, it's not always injuries. That's, I suppose, the point I'm saying. It could be staff turnover. It could be industrial relations complaints. Any number of indicators could be the measure of why now. But I think just putting it on the table and hearing the stories, if you can get some validation that actually we're getting a lot of new staff, we're getting a lot of industrial complaints, we're having customer complaints, then there's something that's going on here, and it might be a new supervisor. It might be something that's got nothing to do with the physical environment. Those risks have always been there, and nothing there probably has changed. But what has changed is the focus on that supervisor's priority areas. And I think in healthcare, we have talked about this before, but a number of nurses, when I read a review for WorkSafe, was saying we get trained on how to use the hoist and the lift and the blah, blah, blah. But the feedback we get from the unit manager is we had 2 patients late for surgery. That's it. So whether we use the hoist or whatever is not even mentioned. It's not a KPI that is assessed. But what is assessed is the way people look at the customer service model. And if that's our measure of success, then we need to have a look at what influence that has on staff behaviours. That may be why they don't use the hoist, because they realise the fastest way is just grab their legs and arms and stick them in the wheelchair and off we go. So it's an interesting topic, that one.
Yeah.
I think that certainly shows the I was going to say, it shows the complexity of what we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It's just not those simple physical injuries. And certainly I would direct all of you present, and if you recommend it to others, of previous talks we have had for the Central Safety Group, particularly on the retail environment, focusing on customer aggression, because what you were saying, David, about that shoplifting, I don't know if it's a changed environment, but it certainly was quite an eye-opener for me around the stocking levels for that. But in 2003, we had Amy Lyons from the National Retail Association talking about facing customer aggression. We've had Ken Rogers from the Reject Shop talking about dealing with customer abuse, manual handling challenges in Bunnings, managing customer behaviour from the ANZ, from one of the big banks, and safety and design from David Trembars, focusing on Coles. So there's a wealth of information available to you on the CSG website to look further into these issues, and to hopefully try and take some of those solutions back to your own workplaces. Just a couple of sort of time, we might just turn off the recording. I do have to go for a 1 o'clock meeting, but you're welcome to stay online to continue that conversation.